Tonight we're in Derby. Welcome to Question Time. Good evening, welcome to Question Time. On tonight's panel, we have Rory Stewart, the government's prison minister, a former Foreign Office minister. He was also deputy governor of 2 Iraqi provinces after the war. Labour's Shadow Home Secretary, an MP for more than 30 years, and a member of Jeremy Corbyn's close circle, Diane Abbott. Kirsty Blackman, the SNP's spokesperson on the economy and deputy leader of the party at Westminster. Anand Menon, Professor of European Politics at King's College London and the director of a think tank which specialises in the UK's relations with the EU. And last but not least, political journalist, author and ardent Brexiteer, I think it's fair to say, Isabel Oakeshott. Question Time. Welcome to all of you here. Welcome to my panel. Of course, welcome to you at home as well. Now, the argument will take place here, but you can argue along at home as you know. You can use the hashtag BBCQT on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram. Join in. Right. Let's hear our first question from Jane Butler.
Is there any deal that can achieve a parliamentary majority?
Well, that's it in a nutshell, isn't it, folks? After Theresa May has, I think it's fair to say, dismally failed to do so thus far. Rory Stewart.
So you've put your finger on the big issue here. What we know, I think, is that there are perhaps 80, maybe as many as 150 MPs that want Remain through a second referendum. We know there are maybe 80 MPs who want no deal at all, which leaves about 400 MPs who presumably want a kind of deal. 200 of them have said that they want the Prime Minister's deal, which is that 500-page document. That leaves another 200 MPs who haven't said exactly what kind of deal they want. And the whole question over the next few weeks is, can we get people to be specific? Presumably they're not going to like all the 500 pages, but presumably they're going to like 495 of them, and we've got to pin it down to what sentences, which bits they do and don't like in order to build the majority.
You say in a few weeks the Prime Minister's got to come back on Monday
with
some kind of plan.
No, the Prime Minister will come back on Monday with a statement. I'm afraid, being realistic, it doesn't feel to me as though we'll have a majority by Monday. I think this
And what about by the 29th of January, which is when the vote will take place, as we found out today?
Well, I pray, because there's been a lot of talk about how the government has had a long time to get this together. But to be fair to the government, and obviously I'm a government minister, so I'm a bit biased here, but to be fair to the government, there is a 500-page document. At least you can read what the government wants. The question is, what do other people really want and not want? And the frustrating thing at the moment, if you look at the amendments going through the House of Commons, is when you say to MPs, OK, will you tell us what would make you vote for this document? Exactly what would you change in this document? It's almost impossible to get them to sign a piece of paper. And if they don't, how do you go back to Brussels and say, please, please, it's going to be very difficult, I'm not sure you could do it, but you might be able to say, please change this, because if you change this, we'll have a majority in the House of Commons. And that's where we haven't really got yet.
Kirsty Blackman, any deal that can achieve a parliamentary majority?
I still think, and I said from the beginning, that actually you were potentially looking at a parliamentary majority for customs union and single market membership. But I think what the Prime Minister needs to do now...
There's no evidence of that. I mean, that's wishful thinking, surely.
And that's where I thought we were, and it's never been tested, because that's not what the Prime Minister's deal says. But I think looking across the benches, looking at the Labour Party, who have now come out in favour of customs union, looking at the Conservative backbenchers who support that very close relationship with the EU, I think you're potentially looking at that. But what the Prime Minister needs to do now, given that very short timescale that you were just mentioning, is extend Article 50. That removes the threat of no deal, and that means that we can have options going forward.
Diane, I'm going to come to you. Let's hear from the woman in the back there.
I'd like to know if Rory thinks that Theresa May is likely to disband any of her red lines.
Well, I think the big question going forward is what is consistent with the Brexit vote. So those red lines that the Prime Minister's produced are the Prime Minister's judgment on what she felt people were voting for in the referendum. Now, there'll be many people in the room who will disagree, but her honest view, and I think it's a reasonable view, is that she felt that people voting for Brexit would expect to have control over immigration, control over free movement of people, and expected to be able to strike trade deals. Those were the two fundamental red lines.
But the thing is, we are where we are now, where the deal with those red lines has not got through Parliament. Theresa May well, she's also not talking to Jeremy Corbyn. We'll get onto that in a minute. But she has talked to other political leaders. Clearly she's talking about finding common ground. You've got the Justice Secretary, David Cork, who said, we need to find a majority in the House of Commons that's consistent with leaving the customs union, but we need to be prepared to be flexible. Is Theresa May being flexible?
No.
No.
Well,
that's the question.
I guess, to try to represent the problem here, the problem is the Prime Minister has spent 2 years negotiating this, and there are two things...
Yes, but look where we are.
But
You've had the vote, it's gone down in flames.
But there are two things we need. So the reason we need to be flexible is we need a majority in the House of Commons. But the reason we need to be realistic is that we also need 27 member states to agree. So actually there are two different things going on here. And the problem is that the flexibility has to be reasonable. It's got to be something that you can then agree with 27 member states in quite a short period of time, and that will involve some compromise.
I mean, can I just point out to you that Michel Barnier, who of course is the man we're negotiating with in the EU, says if the UK decides to adjust its own red lines, the EU will remain ready to go along with evolution and respond favourably. Is there any sign that Theresa May is going to adjust her red lines?
Yes, I think there's definitely...
Is there?
Yeah, no, well, there's this. It's very clear that we lost the vote. I mean, there's no doubt about that, right? There were only...
Has she realised?
Yeah, there were... And not only am I saying this, the Prime Minister stood up immediately after that vote, and I was right next to her, and said she acknowledges that that vote only got 200 votes. So, by definition, in order to get a majority in the House of Commons, it is going to have to change. But the question to members of Parliament is, what kind of changes do they want? Not big, bad,
well,
this is a rubbish deal, but exactly what are those changes?
So,
Yep.
what deal can achieve a parliamentary majority? Is there one, Diane Lowett?
I think that the parameters of a deal that the Labour Party would want to work with the government on would be a customs union, it would be a close relationship with the single market, and it would guarantee certain rights and freedoms, environmental standards, human rights, labour relations issues. And I have to say, people are saying that Jeremy Corbyn won't talk to Theresa May. In September, at Labour Party conference, in terms, the leader of the Labour Party said that if the Prime Minister offered a deal on these lines, a customs union, close relationship with the single market, and some guarantee of rights at work, he was prepared to work with her on it. And we heard nothing.
Well, of course, Diane, because that is not what people voted for.
Just let me finish. We heard nothing, the phone didn't ring. And after 2 years, for Theresa May to be phoning random Labour MPs last week was quite extraordinary. The problem has been all along that she didn't reach out to the House of Commons as a whole.
Okay, but hang on, Diane. You've got a situation now where Jeremy Corbyn won't talk to Theresa May without a precondition. We'll get onto that, without no deal coming off the table. So he's writing to her, she's writing to him. Why don't they just talk?
We would have... We would have loved to talk. That's why Jeremy had it in his conference speech in September. And it's important to remind people of that.
But why not now? Why not now? Because now is now. There's no point in harking back to what was months ago.
Isabel, if you just let me finish.
Well, we'll be here all day if I let you
Jeremy
finish.
sometimes says you have to talk to people with whom you profoundly disagree. He was talking about Hezbollah and Hamas. Theresa May?
Just to get back to Brexit. The reason that we are saying that we wanted to take no deal off the table, we thought that was one of the easiest things you could concede on.
Because it's the law, Diane.
Because
no deal is the law. That is
well,
what
why,
will happen.
So why was Philip Hammond calling business people a few days ago, promising them that Parliament could block no deal? We asked her to do that because we thought it was the easiest thing for her to concede. Even members of the Cabinet are against no deal. We know manufacturers in parts of the country like this are against no deal. It would be catastrophic. And actually, in terms of the safety of the realm, if we come out with no deal and no transition period, all sorts of security and policing arrangements will fall. We thought it was the easiest thing to concede. She hasn't conceded it. And if I was a
know it's not the
manufacturer-
easiest thing for her to concede,
because her own
Diane.
Cabinet don't want it.
But you know it's not the easiest thing for her to
Members of her own
concede.
Cabinet don't want it. And
Now,
if
hang
I
on.
was a manufacturer or worker in this region, I would be very frightened indeed that Theresa May still sees no deal as a viable option.
Well, Diane,
Hang on, wait a
Diane,
minute, Rory. Wait a minute.
It is simply impossible. Hang on, you've given me one word before you interrupt me. It is simply impossible. The Prime Minister cannot rule out no deal because no deal is what the legal default is. So she would have to introduce new legislation. So why? Diane, may I just finish? May I just finish my point? But it's not just that she can't rule out no deal. It is that she shouldn't rule out no deal. Have you ever bought a car or a house? And did you go in there saying, whatever price that car or house is, I am not walking away unless I get that car or that house? You would never do that. So why on earth would you enter any negotiation with the future of our country by ruling out no deal?
Well,
It is an absurd
let's just
position.
clarify one thing, because today Theresa May has written to, because we know they're not talking, has written to Jeremy Corbyn saying that she cannot rule out no deal. It's not up to her. Anand, is that true?
Well, I mean, there's an irony here, isn't there? Because Parliament has voted for a Brexit outcome. It has effectively voted for no deal because MPs voted to give the Prime Minister the authority to trigger Article 50 before they knew what she intended to do. And I think the irony is that, of course, no deal is now the least popular outcome amongst parliamentarians, but it's the one that their voters enabled by not demanding of the Prime Minister before this started, before we give you the authority to trigger Article 50, let us know what you plan to negotiate. We'll have a consensus before we start, OK? If I can just say...
No, but can you also... Can she take no deal off the table?
No deal can't be taken off the table by an extension without the EU agreeing to it, by Parliament without Parliament coming up with a majority for something
But
else.
she could ask the Parliament.
She
could
could. Can I
ask
just say one
Parliament to
more
take it
thing
off the table. Let's just be really clear about this, because this is Theresa May's position tonight, and I
Yes.
want to be clear. If she decides to extend Article 50, she needs to get the rest of the EU to agree to it.
Yeah.
And if she wants to take withdrawal off the table, she needs to get Parliament to agree to it.
Yeah.
Or to get no deal off the table. She needs to
politically,
get
she would
Parliament
need
to agree to it.
Yes, to get no deal off the table,
So
she
it
needs
is
agreement.
possible, but she needs to do it in conjunction with
Well,
others.
Parliament needs to agree on something else.
But the way to get no deal off the table is logically to have a deal. And the way to have a deal is for Jeremy Corbyn to sit down and talk to us and be precise.
Right, let's hear. There are so many hands up. Let's start with the man there in the pale shirt and the grey top. Yes, you.
See, I don't get how our parliament is so divided when we only represent 56 million or so people, when 27 countries and 450 million people have managed to unite and have their priorities on the table. Why can't we just finally unite as a country and move on? It's been 2 years.
The woman in the red and black top.
Rory said that Theresa May has been negotiating for 2 years. Well, I didn't see that happening at the beginning. I think she has left it and she has left it, and now she's saying there's, what, 71 days? And, OK, she's now trying to railroad Parliament, Brussels, everyone. Why didn't we have grown-ups doing it earlier on?
Man there in the glasses.
By leaving no deal on the table, what it ultimately does, it's sort of scaring the EU to come back to the table. By taking that off the table, like Diane's just said there, we may as well just hand them everything.
Of course.
Right now, there is no way, there is no way they're going to come back to the table. No way.
The man in the red jacket.
Like you said, most of Parliament is now do not favour no deal. Isn't that the problem, that all the voters favour no deal and the parliamentarians don't?
Absolutely.
Let's come back to the original question.
Yeah.
Is there any deal that can achieve a parliamentary majority? Isabel?
Well, the answer... look, I can save everybody a lot of time here. I've spent
Do, because it's
the
been 2 years, so
The short
please
answer,
do.
the short answer is no, there isn't, and that is why it seems to me the only option for Theresa May now, and I'm going to admit that it is a suboptimal position, is to walk away. That is all she can do.
So
at
to
this
leave
point.
with no deal?
Yes, absolutely, because there isn't an alternative.
I want to hear from the audience someone who supports that, because that was a massive cheer there. Yeah, you stuck your hand up so quickly, yeah.
Yeah, well, I think it's quite obvious that the European Union are playing a really good game of poker here. We've played our hand out in public. They've done all their negotiations behind closed doors. They've been shoulder to shoulder, and we haven't. I think if we're prepared to walk away now, Angela Merkel needs to sell 850,000 cars to this country. And she's got 2 million jobs at stake. That phone will be ringing pretty quickly if we walk away.
Anand, a deal that can command a majority. Can you see anything there?
Not now, no, but I think next week you'll see parliamentarians voting on lots of different options, and as those options prove to be unpopular, they'll fall off the table, and I think then the thing will shift. But can I just come back to no deal? I think it's very, very important to be clear about no deal. No deal isn't like buying something. It isn't like going to the shop, and if you don't find anything you like, you walk home again. You don't end up back where you started. No deal with the European Union means all the laws that govern our interaction with the European Union, whether you can fly, whether you can trade, whether you can shop, whether you can travel, cease to exist, right? Now, I don't know what people voted for when they voted Leave. 17 million people voted Leave. They voted for lots of different reasons, and they were told by the Leave campaign that a deal would be easy, so I don't believe all of them voted for no deal. But if you think no deal is fine, that's great, but be aware of what it means. It means severe disruption. And from the EU's point of view, what they know is you're absolutely right. No deal will hurt the Europeans. It will hurt Calais. It will hurt people in Belgium, in Amsterdam. It won't hurt all member states, and one of the reasons the EU has remained united is some member states don't really trade with us, so actually they've got better things to worry about than us, so they haven't really taken part in this. But no deal will hit us far worse than it will hit them. Look at this city, okay, where you have companies like Rolls-Royce, where you have companies like Toyota. The managing director of Toyota in Derby has said, in the event of no deal, I can see us closing down at least temporarily because of the trouble we're going to have getting bits in. They export 90% of the Toyotas they make to continental Europe. It will be more difficult. So, in terms of keeping things going when it comes to trade, when it comes to travel, bear in mind travel will be affected too. At the moment, if we leave with no deal, you'll have to apply for a green pass to be able to drive in continental Europe, because those rules will have gone as well.
People crossing the border from Northern Ireland into the south for work, for health, they will need a green card, and they need to apply early.
I don't think that's true in Ireland, because you've got something called the Common Travel Area in Ireland, which means that people
But
can
that
move.
common travel area doesn't cover insurance.
No, but it will affect all sorts of things eventually, like trade, particularly agricultural trade, which is massive in Ireland. So, if you want no deal, that's fine, but be honest about it. It implies a trade-off and it implies massive disruption.
There are so many areas of the Brexit issue that we want to cover this evening. I just want to have another go at the red lines in terms of Theresa May's red lines and what kind of deal we can expect from here, because that ultimately is what it's all about. Are we going to get a deal or aren't we? And if we are, what kind of deal will it be? So let's go to Gopal Rao, please.
Which red line should be scrapped so the UK is not left red-faced?
So which red lines could go just a little bit pink or maybe vanish entirely? Now, listening to Theresa May in Parliament after she lost the vote, she talked about the things that she still feels are important, the things you were talking about earlier, Rory, so control of laws, borders. Is Theresa May prepared to compromise? And if so, which red lines need to go? Which ones would you drop?
Yeah. I think the answer is that you have to do, I'm afraid, 4 things. And the first thing is that you have to make sure that whatever you're delivering is still recognisably a Brexit deal. You can't water this thing down so much that the majority of people who felt they voted for Brexit are getting something that doesn't resemble what they voted for at all. So that's the first thing, in all honour, you have to do. If you're expecting a Brexit referendum, you have to try to be serious about what you felt that meant. I believe, but maybe I'm just speaking for my own constituents or people I talk to there, but I believe that involves controlling free movement of people. I don't think people who voted for Brexit wanted to continue allow free movement of people, right? So that, I think, would be probably the most important red line here. The other stuff you could compromise on, but the final
like
point...
Like what? Give us a for example. Because that's what it comes down to. Not generalities. Which red lines could go? Where would you compromise?
Let's take a specific example. The backstop, right? If there was a majority in Parliament that you could demonstrate, if you could get Jeremy Corbyn to sign up and say that if you got rid of the backstop, he'd vote for the deal, if you got the Brexiteers to say if you got rid of... Jacob Rees-Mogg, for example, he often says when he's on television, if you got rid of the backstop, I'd vote for the deal. What I'd like to see is for them to say it in writing so that we could then go back to Brussels and say, make this one change, you've got a majority in the House of Commons, the deal goes through.
But hang on, that's not Theresa May's red line, that's the EU's red line. Which red line that the Conservatives hold dear would you be prepared to compromise on?
For me, the one that I would not be prepared to compromise on is free movement.
No, that's not what I'm asking. What would you, just quickly, because otherwise I'm never going to get around everybody else. Or is there nothing that you would be prepared to compromise on?
By implication, we have to get a majority. I would be prepared, I'm not the Prime Minister, I would be prepared to compromise on a great deal else. But the question is, are the other side serious? Are the other 200 MPs serious about wanting a deal at all, or are they just going to keep saying no to any compromise we offer? If they're serious, then of course we can shift red lines.
Well, we can ask. Diane Abbott. This is the moment of compromise. Which red lines would you compromise on?
Well, we have said, and we've been saying it since last year, the things that we think are important are the customs union, some sort of deal...
No, but we know what you think is important. You said that at the beginning. So what would you compromise on? Which red lines have you got that in a negotiation you'd be prepared to compromise on?
We have not put forward any red lines. It's only the government that's put forward red lines. That's my point.
But hang on, no red lines is no policy. You have got a policy.
We have got a policy, and I've explained it to you.
Exactly. So are there any areas there that you'd be prepared to compromise on? A customs union, for example?
We're happy to talk to the government about some sort of movement on the customs union.
Jeremy Corbyn is not talking to the government.
The only thing that we have said, and it's not popular with this audience, but I assure you it's popular with business, is that you have to rule out no deal.
What about the 6 tests that Labour have set? One of the most interesting ones, perhaps, is that whatever deal is done has to deliver the same benefits as being in the single market and the customs union.
That was, in fact, David Davis who said that, and we were just repeating what he'd said.
So is that, is that not one of your 6 tests?
It is one of our 6 tests.
Right, okay.
But what we were doing was repeating what, let me see, was that the second
hang on, never mind that. It's either your test or it isn't your test. If it is your test, I mean, Michel Barnier has said that's not possible. Third countries cannot have the same rights and benefits. Would that be something you'd compromise on?
unlike the Prime Minister, we are prepared to be flexible on everything.
Okay.
Well,
Hang on a minute. You heard it here
Yeah,
first.
heard it here first.
Literally
Okay.
everything.
What
So
we
no
want-
red lines at all.
No. What we want, with the Labour Party, what we want is a deal that is in the best interests of the entire country. We're not being rigid. We're not being rigid like the Prime Minister. The only thing we're saying is she has to take no deal off the table.
Okay, so sorry, can I just come
very
in?
quickly,
very
Rory.
quickly. So, in order to get any kind of future relationship, doesn't matter whether you're talking Norway or Canada, you have to go through the withdrawal agreement. 500-page text. The question is, what lines in that text do Labour want to change? That's what we're waiting for, not the big picture, not the we like a customs union, we like a single market relationship. Which pages, which lines, which sentences? If we can get an answer on that, we have a deal. If we have a deal, Britain will be in a much better place in 3 weeks' time.
Kirsty Blackman.
Well, our position is that we'd like to remain in the EU because people of Scotland voted to remain in the EU. And we would like the whole UK to remain in the EU. So by definition, anything beyond that is a compromise.
Which red lines do you think should be scrapped?
The things I would fight hardest for are customs union and single market membership, because there will be job losses in the event of coming out of the customs union and single market. There will be hundreds of thousands of job losses.
The question is, the thing is,
well,
we all know, because we've all been seeing it happen in Parliament, how strongly the various parties feel about the things that they are holding dear. We're now in a position where we're talking about compromises, and the question is about which red lines should be scrapped, so the UK is not left red-faced. What would you scrap?
The one I would fight hardest for Theresa May to scrap is freedom of movement. She needs to allow freedom of movement. Freedom of movement has been an immeasurably good thing. It's been a good thing for people coming to live here, and it's been a good thing for our citizens who've been able to go and live and work in other EU countries. I would fight hardest for that.
The woman in the glasses there.
All of this chat now has just been about, come together, collaborate, find a compromise. Why was this not done before? Why did people not work together before this? We've now got 70 days.
The man in the front.
The reason that all this compromise is difficult is because it's just based on a fantasy that you can get the same benefits of being in the single market without following the rule book. Now, I really would say that to Diane, I voted for Jeremy twice as leader, and a third time, why will you not back a second referendum? It's what Labour members want. We want a second, we want a legal choice. And if Keir Starmer stood for election right now, or David Lammy, I would vote for them over Corbyn, because he's been weak on it. Please just back, if he wants to stand for the many, not the few, a referendum poll recently said 56% of voters would vote for Remain in a referendum. Why doesn't he back a second referendum?
Now, I'm going to come on to a second referendum in a moment. If you forgive me, I'll come on to that in a moment. The woman back there with the scarf.
Listening to Diane Abbott's description of the arrangement that she wants with Europe, it just strikes me that we've already got all of that. We've already got all of that right now. With the best deal that we're going to get. All of the other deals we're talking about, no deal, Theresa May's deal, none of them are going to be half as good as for this country or our children as what we've got right now. So why will Labour leadership not back the majority of their party and back a second referendum?
Isabel Oakeshott, before we get on to second referendum, and we will get onto that, believe me, we're talking about which red line should be scrapped.
Well, I don't accept the premise of the question, because I wouldn't scrap any red lines
Hang on,
at all.
the whole point of this programme is that the audience asks the questions
what
they
I'm
want,
going to
and
pick
that
up
is the
on-
question
what
which you
I'm
need to
going to
answer.
pick up on is your assertion that freedom of movement has been a great thing for this country. It may have been a very good thing for Scotland. I think it's been a disaster for the rest of the nation. And the reason that many people... The reason that many people voted for Brexit in the first place was to get rid of freedom of movement. It cannot be on the table as part of something that could just be blithely deleted as a red line because things have all got too difficult. That is what people voted for.
So what red line would you scrap? Hang on, what red line would you scrap?
Well, I'm more relaxed about the backstop situation than many Brexiteers probably are. So maybe there's some flexibility around that. But we must be able to strike our own free trade deals. I mean, this talk that maybe we can just stay in the customs union, then what on earth what on earth is the point of Brexit if we're going to keep freedom of movement, which is what will happen if we stay in the single market, and we are not going to be able to strike any trade deals? Then why are we bothering, frankly?
I'm grateful, thank you. Isabel, the premise of the question is that we are doing compromise, something that the far right is not particularly famous for. And as you tweeted, hashtag pray for Isabel, because the only Brexiteer on the panel apparently looked to your right and then looked over from that. They're trying to leave as well. This is the problem. You think you're by yourself, you're not. You're with other people who similarly fail to notice that what they're asking for is change in others, not change in themselves. Rory, you want to change the backstop, not yours EU. Diane, you want to change the no deal. That's not for you to decide, that's for Theresa May. You and dear leader could happily say, Theresa, I've talked to people with whom I strongly disagree, you're one of them, let's chat. Look inwards for a second and realise you're the cause of the problem.
Okay.
Just for a second.
Rory, wait 1 minute.
The EU is in recession. Surely there's no need to remove any red lines. Surely this is a time to apply maximum leverage in any negotiation.
One of the problems is we've had 2 years of shadow ministers and cabinet ministers laying bare exactly how everyone's going to vote in any vote. And the EU leaders just need to watch Question Time every week and they'll know exactly how everyone's feeling. People saying they want to stay, people saying they want to leave. The country voted to leave. Simple as that.
I rather like the idea of EU leaders watching Question Time and getting tips. I think that's remarkable. Anand, let's just come back to the question, and then I'm going to move on to the second referendum, because we had 2 questions on that. But which red lines should be scrapped, in your view?
I don't think scrapping red lines is going to help the Prime Minister, Gopal, to be honest, for 2 reasons. I think, one, if she starts to be more flexible on a customs union or the single market, and therefore hopes to get Labour or conceivably SNP MPs more interested in her deal, she will lose Tory votes. And I think the danger for the Conservative Party then, if the Prime Minister moves too far to the opposition, is that the cracks in the Parliamentary Conservative Party just become too wide. So at home, I don't think it's going to help. And the second thing I would say about this is red lines are a bit of a distraction. There are 2 documents in the deal that Theresa May has signed. There's the big fat one, the withdrawal agreement, which has the backstop and all that in. And there's a short, very vague and woolly one called the political declaration. The political declaration isn't legally binding, OK? So, in a sense, it's a declaration of intent and nothing more than that. The withdrawal agreement, if we ratify it, is the European Union has said they will not renegotiate the withdrawal agreement, and Tory MPs who are opposed to the backstop are opposed to the withdrawal agreement. So that is where the real problem lies with this deal, over the document that the EU do not want to renegotiate. And that's a real problem for us now.
I'm going to carry on. There are so many questions here on Brexit. Before I do, I just want to let you know at home that Question Time will come from Winchester next week, and the following week we are in Lincoln. So details of how to apply for the audience are on the screen. I'll give them again at the end. Look what's happening here. Why would you not want to join in? Right. Our next question is from Harry Lister.
Would a people's vote be anything other than a democratic catastrophe?
So here we are, on to the second referendum question. Kirsty Blackman.
Well, Theresa May has tried to get her deal through the House of Commons. She said it's the only deal that there is on the table. She said it's the only one that's available. It's only one because of her red lines, but this is her point. She lost by 230 votes. That's a huge majority against her. It's unprecedented, the numbers against her in that. Now, I don't think, no matter how much tinkering she does, she's going to get this deal through the House of Commons. But what she could do is she could say, well, this is how I want to leave the EU. This is the way that I've negotiated it. This is the only way that I think is the conceivable way forward. Therefore, I'm so proud of my deal. I believe it's so good. I'm going to put it to the people, and I'm going to let them choose between my deal and remaining in the EU.
Hang on, because it's a bit late for that. Hang on, she's lost. Well, It's an interesting idea. I mean, she has lost that vote in Parliament. So you're suggesting she still goes ahead with it on a second referendum?
So she says she wants to talk, right? Now, I agree the time to talk was before now, and actually we put forward our compromise proposals in December 2016, and she refused to take any of those on board. She says she wants to be constructive. She has to actually follow through on that. So far, it appears that she's still got all of these red lines that she's unwilling to compromise on. She's not going to compromise on any red lines, and the deal is going to look exactly the same with a few words changed. She's still not going to get it through Parliament. And if she still believes this is the only deal possible and we want to leave, we don't want to leave with a no deal.
I mean, in fairness, we don't actually know what's going to be happening on Monday, so I don't think we can predict with such certainty that that's exactly what it will look like on Monday.
No, I think her only option is to extend Article 50, then have a people's vote between her deal and remaining in the EU.
But, so there are two problems with that. The first thing is that those of you in the audience who want no deal would not be satisfied with a decision between the Prime Minister's deal and Remain, would you?
But you also wouldn't be satisfied with parliamentarians supporting the Prime Minister's deal.
Hang on, let Rory speak, please.
The second problem, though, is that a second referendum isn't going to tell us anything we don't already know, right? What do we know? We already know that the country is split almost 50-50 between Brexiteers and Remainers. Doesn't matter how many times you ask the country. The divisions are just going to get deeper. The point is that you're all sitting next to people. Some of you voted Brexit, some of you voted Remain. We've all got to work together, live together for the next 40 years. So my view is that we need a deal that leaves the European Union but remains close to it economically, close to it diplomatically, in order to heal the country. Bring this room together, bring the nation together.
Can I just ask, who here supports the idea of a second referendum? Stick your hand up if you do. The woman here. Why do you support it, and what would you want written? What the questions would you want on it?
Well, a second referendum is not catastrophic to democracy, okay? Democracy is kinetic, it moves, we're 2 years further on, yeah? And we know a lot more about what Brexit would look like now than we did 2 years ago. And so all those people that voted 2 years ago, and lots of people who weren't able to vote because they weren't old enough, have been following the conversations in Parliament, and people now are much better informed about what Brexit might look like, and it frightens a hell of a lot of people. So what we need is a second referendum.
And what questions would you want on it?
Well, we would have to have a no deal. Would people support no deal Brexit? Would people support the plan, whatever the Parliament comes up with, or do people want to remain? So there needs to be at least 3 questions on that ballot
And that's
paper.
assuming that Parliament come up with a plan. The man here in the blue shirt.
The referendum, everyone's going on about a second referendum. David Cameron said it was a once-in-a-lifetime referendum. We were believing the customs union, we were believing the single market, and everybody knew because he posted a leaflet through the door. Every single door in Britain got a leaflet to read. So when he says they're ignorant, they're not ignorant. They knew what they were voting for. And we voted to leave on March the 29th. Anything less than that is just against democracy. We've had the vote, we don't need a second one.
Well, of course, we're not hearing that much from David Cameron at the moment, though I did notice he went jogging yesterday. He's been on holiday and he's been jogging. Wait a minute, let me hear from Anand.
I mean, it might well be, as Kirsty says, that another referendum, I can't stand the phrase people's vote, I'm afraid, ends up being the only way forward. And I don't think it's anti-democratic. If Parliament legislates for something, that's democratic under our system. But I think you've got to be, again, you've just got to be honest about how hard and how divisive it will be. Firstly, it's hard to achieve because Parliament have got to agree to legislate for one. And you've
Can
seen
I just
how
check, Anand, because Theresa May is saying today it would take a year.
No, it won't take a year. It'll probably take about 20, 22, 23 weeks to organise from start to finish. The last referendum they legislated in, December 2015, we had it in June, so it was about 6 months.
So it would take a year it would take a year if they took 7 months off in the middle.
Yeah, if they had summer, exactly, yeah. But it would be hard to achieve because Parliament has to agree to it, and then they've got to agree to a question, which would be a nightmare. I don't necessarily think it'll be better than the first time round because I still think it'll be an argument about a future about which there are no facts. It'll be just as speculative and vague as the first time round, and it would be massively divisive because whatever else you think about the referendum of 2016, it was a remarkable moment in our democratic history that mobilised people who either haven't voted or haven't voted for a long time, and I think those people would, with some reason, feel a little bit hacked off that they were asked to do it again. And the final question, I suppose, is, would it definitely fix things? And there I'm a little bit uncertain, because if you imagine we had another referendum, imagine we got to the stage where Parliament couldn't decide and we defaulted somehow to a second referendum. And we ended up with a result that was 52-48 the other way on a smaller turnout than 2016, with fewer than 17 million people voting Remain. Would that settle the question? No.
I just want to come back to you. Would that settle the question for you?
It's difficult, isn't it? No one really wants a second referendum, but on the other hand, I feel that people didn't have the information, didn't have the right information, and the Leave campaign was such a dirty campaign.
As was the Remain
and so I really think people need the full facts, and I don't think any of us have the full facts in the room. No one really knows what it's going to look like.
In fairness, there were questions over both Leave and Remain campaigns.
Well, yeah.
Diana, but let me come to you. So, would a people's vote, would a second referendum, be anything other than democratic catastrophe? Clearly, you don't think that, because it's part of your policy.
Yeah, just to reassure some people in the audience, a second referendum, or people's vote, whatever you want to call it, is part of our policy package. We agreed it at conference. The first thing we have campaigned to do is to vote down Theresa May's deal, which managed the extraordinary thing of uniting both Brexiters and Remainers against it. It was such a poor deal. Now we are calling for a general election. We think that's the vote the public needs and wants. But
that didn't
on
work.
the question of a people's vote, I don't think it's fundamentally undemocratic. In a democracy, you're entitled to change your mind. But let me say this, and I've said it in public before.
Actually, before you say that, can I just say, Jeremy Corbyn seems to be giving the impression of wanting to do everything but have a second
I've just
referendum.
explained to you what our policies are.
I know, but he doesn't seem terribly keen on it.
It's fine to have jabs at Jeremy, but let me just explain to you what our policies are. And what I'm saying is what I've always said. The thing about a second referendum is people should be careful what they wish for. My view, and I voted Remain, is that if we had a people's vote tomorrow, Leave would win again. And you just have a lot of very angry Leave voters. But there is nothing undemocratic about it, and it may be that in the end, that's the only solution there is.
The woman at the back.
I'd just like to ask Diane, if Labour, who's desperate for a general election, if you don't get the result that we want, will we have a second vote on that?
Diane, I'll come back to you. Yes, the man there on the corner in the blue... No, just a... That's it, there.
Would a second vote not be a betrayal of the Labour voters who voted Leave, which many did vote Leave?
One look back there with a hand up. Yes, you.
We only had one vote to join, and I remember the information wasn't exactly very good then, so why have two votes to leave?
The man there in the grey top.
You know what worries me more than Brexit? And that is if we had a general election and Labour got in, Diane Abbott would be responsible for policing, immigration and the national security. That worries me more than Brexit.
Dan, I'm sure you want to respond to that, but I haven't yet heard from Isabel on the question. So, a second vote, would it be anything other than a democratic
for once,
catastrophe?
And this will probably never happen again. I actually agree with Diane.
Oh my God, hold the front page, everybody. You won't hear this very often.
I have come full circle on the question of a second referendum. As a Brexit supporter, I'm actually not afraid of a second referendum. I think it is a sickening position to be in, that we have to or might have to have one. It is an absolute travesty that our politicians have failed to deliver on what was the biggest democratic mandate for anything. But if we have to go down this line, I think we'll win even bigger. And let's tell them again if they can't deliver it. And I just want to pick up one thing that you said, Dan. I am bewildered as to why Labour is so keen for a general election. You are way behind in the polls. What makes you think that you're going to win? It is a damning indictment, isn't it, on your leadership, that even amid all this mayhem, you and your leader are miles behind the Tories.
Just Just as a point of information, currently we're kind of, in the polls overall, we're kind of level pegging. We went
6 points behind.
You're behind, Diane.
Yeah, but we went into the last general election 20 points behind. And Theresa May was convinced she was going to smash us. I believe that if we could make up 20 points in the last general election, I believe we could win any forthcoming general
Well, you need to have a general election, and you're not, you've tried and you've failed so far.
I don't think hope is a strategy, Diane.
I want to move on to another question. Daniel Harrison.
Is it inevitable that Article 50 will have to be extended?
Is it inevitable Article 50 will have to be extended? Anand, I want to come to you on this.
It's quite likely at the moment, yes, because even if you imagine... I mean, the quickest way through, I suppose, at the moment would be for some version of this deal to be passed, which is going to take a while, let's face it, because Parliament's a long way from that now. And then, just to add to your joy, after it's passed, Parliament has to pass this enormous piece of legislation called the Withdrawal Agreement Bill, which puts all the flesh on the bones of the withdrawal agreement. And that has to go through full parliamentary procedure and could take several months. And, of course, Parliament might slow it down, the House of Lords might slow it down, MPs who aren't happy about leaving or the nature of leaving might try and slow it down. So I would say it is probable that we will... The only way I think in which it's obviously we don't have to do it is if somehow we slither towards no deal. I don't see Parliament voting to leave with no deal. I think there is no majority for that whatsoever. So I think it is more than likely, yes.
Sorry, haven't they already done that by triggering Article 50?
Legally, yes, but I mean, I suppose the rather lame answer I'd give to that is, but I don't think they were aware that that's what they were doing when they did it.
As it may, that's what they voted for. And I'm sorry, if they can't agree on anything else, we're going to go round and round in circles, second referendums, people's votes, whatever you want to call it. We need to deliver on the result of the referendum.
The other thing I'd say, and we forget this too easily in this country, is delaying Article 50 isn't up to us. The European Union has to agree it unanimously between 27 countries, and that's not always easy. And they've said, we'll delay Article 50 if you give us a good reason. If you're having a general election, if you're having a referendum, we're going to be less keen to delay Article 50 just to watch your Parliament shilly-shally around, fail to arrive at a decision, and you turn around and say, can we have a bit more time to keep... You need a plan.
Nonetheless, there are a number of leaders or senior politicians within the EU at the moment who are talking about the possibility of extending Article 50, which is obviously a way of delaying everything so that parliamentarians can find some way through this. Why is Theresa May so unkeen on that idea?
Well, the reason she's so unkeen on that idea is that basically it's a distraction. Delay is about timing, but it doesn't get round the fundamental problem. These things we've been talking about tonight, second referendum we've just been talking about, no deal we were talking about before, the only way out of this problem is a deal. And the only way out of a deal, I keep being kind of boring about this, is trying to get a legal text agreed, a withdrawal agreement agreed. And that's the key. All this stuff about delaying Article 50, fine. And as Anand has just said, if the European Union felt that there was sincerity from the people who didn't vote for the deal, Brexiteers, Labour, they might delay it. But the question is, are parliamentarians now going to be prepared? And this is why I like the question from there. Are they going to be prepared to be locked in a room and compromise? 650 people, lock the door, like one of those elections for a pope. Wait for the white smoke to come out of the top.
Would you like to be in that room, folks? I think it would be pretty interesting. No, I hear the answer there.
Can I suggest another reason why Theresa May is not keen to extend Article 50, apart from the continuing uncertainty that it would bring? And it's actually a very straightforward one. It is that there are European elections in May. Now, if we are still in the EU at that point, it would be an absolute travesty if we did not have any representation in the EU. So what would have to happen is that we would have to field candidates for the European elections. And I can tell you now that if we go down that route, there will be some kind of Brexit-supporting party or entity that will put forward candidates, and you will get a slew of Eurosceptic MEPs going to Brussels, and she absolutely doesn't want that.
Kirsty Blackman.
In reality, there's a bit longer than that because the Parliament doesn't actually sit until July, even though there's elections in May, so there's an additional time period there. And in terms of whether or not she has to extend Article 50, I think she has to ask to extend Article 50 because you've got to get through Parliament, you need to get the Agriculture Bill, the Fisheries Bill, the Trade Bill, the Immigration Bill, the Financial Services Bill, 600 statutory instruments. All of these need to go through Parliament in order for our laws to make sense. If the UK leaves the EU, they have to go through Parliament. Now, if she was to say that she was going to extend Article 50 in order to have a people's vote, then my impression is the EU would probably agree to that. I think they would be comfortable with that as a democratic process and something that they would be keen to extend Article 50 for. So I think that's her next step.
Well, they might not. We've no way of knowing that at the moment. Diane Abbott.
Well, the Labour Party isn't calling for an extension of Article 50 because, as you heard, I think it's Institute of Government which said that there are, I think, 12 separate bills that need to go through before the end of March.
But the question is it inevitable, given the lack of agreement and given that at the moment, clearly Theresa May and Jeremy Carr even talking, is it inevitable that it will be extended?
We have a government minister here. Maybe he can tell us how
well,
the government
I've asked
is going to get
already.
through 12 separate bills between now and the end of March.
Hang on, let's not get into that level of detail. Simply the question is, will Article 50 have to be extended in principle, given that at the moment there is no agreement? That's the point.
If the government has a method for getting all this legislation through, of course you won't have to extend it.
Okay.
The other thing is that people didn't vote to leave on the 29th of March 2019. That wasn't on the table when they voted in the referendum in 2016. That wasn't hard. They didn't even know Theresa May would be the Prime Minister when they voted in the referendum in 2016. So this is not a hard date in anybody's mind other than Theresa May's mind. And the only reason it is a hard date for anybody else is because she's made it a hard date for other people. So it is perfectly possible to extend that date.
Now, we've not got much time left on the programme, and we could talk about Brexit for the entire hour. Let's go crazy. Let's talk about something else. Just the last 4 or 5 minutes. Do you think? Should we do that? Let's have a question from Kalila Story.
To combat global warming, is it time we all went vegan?
Isabel Oakeshott.
Well, I wouldn't go that far, but this is actually something I really care about. Some years ago, I co-authored a book called Farmageddon on the true cost of cheap meat. And the truth is, we do eat far too much rubbishy meat. And that is not just a huge environmental issue, it is a massive animal welfare issue. And I think I think it's hopeless trying to persuade everybody to be vegans or vegetarians, but what I would like to see is people being much more selective about the meat that they eat and trying to choose higher welfare, smaller amounts of higher welfare food, in which people have actually reared animals in a compassionate way rather than piling them high and rearing them in barns in hideous conditions which no animal should be subjected to.
And can I just say, there was a little groan in the audience when we talked about this, but obviously today, I'm sure you're aware of this, scientists have said a new diet consisting of less meat, more nuts, could save lives and avoid environmental catastrophe. And of course, there's enough land to feed 9 billion people on Earth. This is according to the UN, if 40% of crops used to feed animals were used to feed humans. Anand.
Well, I have to say, Piers Morgan seems intent on turning us all vegan at the moment by having a go at vegan sausage rolls. I mean, I don't think we should all turn vegan, no, but I think we are very bad at taking into consideration the broader implications of the lifestyles we have. And I think with the challenge of global warming, we need to be more responsible and we need to start at home. And I think food is one good place to start because actually the food we eat is having a massive impact on the planet. Whether it's importing stuff that we don't need to be importing or the amount of meat we eat, that has implications for the future of our planet. And I think we all should be more concerned about that.
Amanda Greycott.
I
find it funny how experts constantly tell us about global warming when they're the ones flying all around the world, going to the UN, you making all of that carbon, all of you in the panel probably driven your cars all the way down here.
Got the train.
We
I
were
don't know what you're
all on
talking
the
about.
train.
Look at the building we're in. We all got the train. The man there in the blue shirt.
What concerns me most about climate change is our ability to tackle it, given the divisiveness that we have seen through Brexit. Would the political parties, all political parties, be prepared to commit in their manifestos to work in a bipartisan way to tackle such things as climate change?
Well, the question, let me bring you back to the original question, Rory, was, is it time that we all went vegan in order to combat global warming? Go on, make that commitment here.
No, but I think this question here is a really good one, because this goes to the heart of all our politics. And I think there's to make an unpopular point to end on, because I've got to end on an unpopular point. We've got to
Well,
be,
you don't have to.
We've got to be careful with the idea that what you want is 650 individual MPs perpetually coming up with what they think. I think one of the things we're learning is that the things we've criticised for 100 years, party systems, whips, organisation, manifestos, have a value because there's a bit more predictability in it. And it doesn't matter whether you're dealing with climate change on a manifesto or whether you're dealing with Brexit on a manifesto. It's no bad thing for voters to know that when they vote from somebody from a party, they know what they're going to get. This idea that 650 people get to get out of bed every morning and be independent isn't necessarily the best thing for policy or the country.
Woman at the back then.
I find it really interesting that as soon as we ask a question like this, everybody is looking to point the finger, government should tell us what to do, somebody should be leading my thoughts about this issue. This is one thing that people can do, that they can do independently, and it feels like maybe we need to make more decisions individually and think about how we can directly affect everything through the decisions we make individually ourselves.
Diane.
I think it's a good question because climate change is just one of the issues being pushed off the agenda by these interminable debates around Brexit. But I don't think everyone should go vegan. I don't think that's realistic. But I do think over time, people are eating less red meat and more vegetables and gradually inching towards a healthier diet. And I also think this, just as there is more unity around a desirable Brexit deal than is apparent, perhaps, to people on the outside or what you read in the newspapers. I think there is more unity around this issue of climate change in Parliament than you might imagine. And I think that's a good thing. So no, everyone shouldn't go vegan, but yes, we should be talking a lot more and doing a lot more to combat climate change. That's the greatest threat to our children.
Kirsty.
I think the first thing on the going vegan thing is that pasture land, for example, is really good at locking in carbon. So there are additional things to be considered if you reduce the amount of pasture land we have, for example. I think we all need to make changes. I think we're doing an awful lot in Scotland to do things like improve the insulation in houses, which significantly
Should we all go vegan? That's the question.
Well,
not about insulation.
Coming on to that, I don't think we should necessarily all go vegan. I think there are issues with cost of things like this. So you've got a problem where if you go into a well-known supermarket, for the cost of an avocado, you can buy a 6-pack of beef burgers. Now, we need to improve that before people are able to make those healthier choices, those choices that are better for the environment. So I think it'd be very difficult for us to mandate everybody to go vegan and for them to get the right amount of protein that they would need to eat in their diets in order to be healthy.
Well, on that note, our hour is up. Next week we'll be in Winchester, and the week after that we will be in Lincoln. You can call 0330 123 9988 if you'd like to be in the audience, or you can go to the Question Time website. You can follow the instructions there. And if you want to have your say on tonight's topics, you can join Adrian, Charles and guests on Question Time Extra Time. As always, that's on 5 Live now. So for now, I just want to say my thanks to our panel. My thanks to you, the audience, for being here, asking so many questions and getting so involved. My thanks to all of you at home. From Derby, bye-bye.
Brexit